Hey folks, it's Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge. We've got another Fixed Blade Friday coming at you. This is the HX Outdoors D-170, the Mercenaries knife. And if you think you've seen this before, you sort of have. I no longer have the D-165, but that is the large brother of this knife. The large brother of this knife is, a full-size, almost 4-inch blade. This guy is a fair bit smaller. I've got large hands that border just on extra large, and if I use the sneak up choil here, I can just get it in my hand. If I don't use that sneak up choil, my pinky starts to fall off the end a little bit. This is a smaller fixed blade. It comes in a Kydex type sheath, a tech lock-ish kind of clip for your belt. And it's also called the Mercenaries Tactical Knife. D2 steel, and I'll talk about that on this HX Outdoors knife in a little while once I get to the tabletop mode. I'm calling this not really a tactical knife. I'm calling it a fantasy knife that actually is somewhat functional. That's my initial thoughts of this thing. So why don't you stick around and find out why I claim that and what else I think about this thing. Let's watch. First thing that we'll talk about very briefly is this Kydex type sheath. You've got your sort of military type green on one side, black on the other side, and you can wear it left or right if you move the tech lock type clip to the other side, and it's easy enough to turn around. You can rotate it 90 degrees and wear it so that your knife sits like, well, let's use a pair of pants here and raise this up a bit. You can wear it so that it goes like this on your belt and sits up on your waist like that. Or you can turn it and make it so that it will sit this way on your belt. Either way, it does print a bit, because it does stand out over an inch and a half, almost 2 inches off your belt. Well, not quite, about an inch and a half, about 3 centimeters up to this side here. So it does show off a little bit depending on a few things, your body shape and, the clothes you're wearing and so many variables. I prefer to carry it this way. I did that for a while, so I've got it on the horizontal mode right now. And it's easy to change around. You just need a Phillips screwdriver or a standard flat screwdriver. Turn it around and move it. It will only mount on these two holes, the holes that are next to this notch right there. And that's the only choice you have. All these other holes are different dimensions than what you get on that pattern right there. It's the type of tech lock-ish that just sort of clips on, and then these two sides hold it. You have to squeeze them together to open it. But this flap comes over and locks it up in place. And so when you're wearing this on your belt, this can't open up because, these pokey things would have to poke into you before it can fall down and open up enough before you can then squeeze this and have it push against your body, because your body's on this side, to get it to open up. So it's a fairly secure system. Once it's on your belt, it's not going to open up and fall off very easily. I can't guarantee that it won't, but it's highly, highly unlikely. And so there you go. This sheath here, it weighs about 2 ounces. We'll talk more about the other weights later on, but I'm going to put this aside for now. This knife, as I showed in the intro, sort of fits in the hand best when it's in the sneak up choil mode, but it's also the most comfortable for use that way as well. And you stick that index finger up there, and it's protected from the cutting edge quite well. And then your edge is right up next to your finger, and your thumb is nicely resting on this sort of jimped area on the spine of the blade. I'm calling this a modified Tanto. I don't know what to call it. It's sort of a fantasy kind of style blade. It's not really a saber grind. This section here could probably be called a saber grind, but then your final grind right here is, super thick, and we'll talk about that later. It's not really a Scandi grind, although these grinds right here are basically like a Scandi because they come right down to the cutting edge. No other micro grind at all or nothing else on there. It's just straight down to the edge. So that's really, Scandi there, and, saber grind here, and you have what you have. It's got all kinds of stuff on it. This final edge right here is much more like an axe. How an axe comes down and then it's got a final grind that, takes up a few centimeters not a few centimeters, takes up a few millimeters right there. But it works okay for using if you want to use it to cut some wood or outdoor kind of bushcraft kind of tasks. It cuts quite well. You can get it to do your, prepping for getting some wood ready. You can get your, what's it called? My brain's farting when I'm trying to think of the word for feather stick. I think the word's feather stick. So you can produce feather sticks if you want to. And it's relatively easily done. I'm a little bit out of practice right now, and it's kind of awkward in my position right here in the basement. But that edge can do that. And these two edges up at the top here, they can be used, for kind of chisel cuts. It really wants to dig in because that's a super sharp edge right there and there. And you can just sort of do any kind of work that you want to do, as long as you keep your fingers away from that cutting edge, because she is sharp, baby. She is very sharp. Cutting across the grain. It's so sharp that it's very, very good at cutting. And if you could see that, how smooth that is, that's just super smooth, and that's going, sort of across the grain that way. So this knife edge is an effective edge. Just what is it effective at doing? That's a little bit harder to tell. It's a very kind of special design. Tactical, could it take care of a guy? Like if you got yourself into a fight, if this edge touched a person, it would cut in. It really would. This kind of edge is super sharp, and I've done nothing to it. I've not needed to. I didn't put it on my sharpening system at all because, it just is very, very sharp. Let's try cutting some of this paracord. I've got, so let's put 2 layers of this 9-strand paracord, and we'll put it up here on the main edge, and it just wants to cut through those, no problem. This sort of saber grind edge, it just zips through it before you even try. You don't even have to make an effort. It's already through it. Just very easily cuts through that on that edge. And on the second edge right here, same thing. Oh, gotta hold it still. Actually, that edge might not be quite as sharp. No, it's not quite as sharp right now. Let's try that second edge just that way. Just a slight slice motion, and that edge is cutting very well. So right now this edge is the sharpest, but this edge here also works very, very well. It's very sharp. That's the flat edge, and as you can see, you can cut flat on a table surface with that edge because of the way it's shaped. Can cut. You've got room for your hand in here, and the edge can come down. You can work on that edge, and you can work on that edge. Before I do the dimensions, let's talk about, is this really D2 steel or is it not? Well, they claim that it's D2 steel, and I've been doing some testing, and I've been getting comments saying that my testing is a bunch of bunk, bogus, it's useless, it doesn't really say anything. Apparently, people seem to think that I'm claiming something different than I am. Let me very briefly talk about the way I test this D2 steel. I was inspired by Cedric and Ada's channel. Peter over there did some testing, and he did some corrosion testing where he compared how well these knives that claim to have D2 steel would rust next to knives that were genuine D2. And that's basically what I was inspired by. So what I do is I create some saline solution, some salt water, and I scuff up the edge on some knives, just the first 2 inches or so from the tip back, folding knives, every knife, whatever. And then I just dunk them in some salt water for half an hour. add a solution that's at least 5% saltwater solution. And then I take it out and I don't dry them off. I just set them aside and let them dry by themselves for about 4 hours. And then I take a look and see how they corrode compared with the genuine D2 knives. And I've got 3 genuine D2 knives that I use with this comparison. The most that I'm going to say is either this seems to rust or corrode like D2. So it is probably D2. Or I will say this seems to corrode more like stainless steel, not very much like D2. So it is probably not D2. That's the most I am claiming. I will not say this is D2 steel. I will not say this is not D2 steel. I won't go there because I don't have the technology to do the actual metallurgical tests to prove one way or another what it is. I'm just saying what I think it probably is. HX Outdoors seems to be using genuine D2 steel. There's other brands that don't. And there's a big issue going on here. And that is there's brands that are the rebranders. And then there's brands that take their own name and they're the only brand that you'll see this knife in. Like Ganzo, well, although they're copying other people, but Ganzo knives are made by Ganzo. It's their knife. They don't sell the exact knives that they make and have another company put their name on it. So you don't see a Ganzo knife. There are a couple exceptions. You don't see the majority of Ganzo knives with any other name other than Ganzo. And then you've got a company like Y-Start, and you'll find Y-Start knives that have different brand names on them, and they look exactly like a Y-Start knife, and yet it says Fura on it, or it says, something else, and the list can be very long. Loads of knives, LDT, BMT, I can't recall off the top of my head the names, but there's a whole bunch of brands where you can find the same knife with a whole bunch of different brand names. I'm calling those rebranders. Rebranders seem to be willing to lie about what the product is made from. So the materials that they use, rebranders seem quite willing to lie. I'm not saying they lie. On some knives, they might not be lying. On some knives, they might be lying. Who knows? Brands where the brand name is put on the knife, and this is the only knife with that brand name. This knife doesn't come in other brand names is what I'm trying to say. So like HX Outdoors, like Ganzo, like Two Knife, like Techhut, and there's a good long list. They make their own knives at their own factories, and they tend not to lie about the materials that they use on their knives. HX Outdoors is one of those that's not a rebrander. They're a regular good brand. They function just like any other kind of Western brand does. They put their own name on their own knives, and they're honest about what they make. That's what I believe about HX Outdoors. Can I be wrong? Yes, I can. I don't think I'm wrong, just like you don't think you're wrong. None of us walk around thinking we're wrong. Well, there's some odd exceptions, but that's the way life is. We tend to think that we're right. Otherwise, we couldn't go on, right? So I'm not guaranteeing that I'm right. I just believe that that's what HX Outdoors is about. And now I've babbled on for a long time. Let's get on with the rest of the details. Let's talk about the rest of the materials. This is a G10 material. And then they've got screws in here. I'm slightly disappointed. This side looks really nice. Once it focuses, you can see that. They've got kind of Torx, and then they've just got 5 little holes for decorative, but it's Torx on the inside. This side looks pretty good until you take a close look at the middle one, and I'll zoom in for that. Yeah, they shipped it, and it was already half stripped out. That kind of sucks. I can get a screw to sort of hold still in there, but that's how it was from the factory. So I don't really like that. And because it seems to be stripping easily, I'm not going to try to take this apart. It may or may not be epoxied between the G10 and the blade stock. I don't know, and so I'm not going to try to take that apart. It seems to me that it's probably epoxied together and then they screwed it. And then the steel, I believe, is probably D2. Now let's do the dimensions. Cutting edge, and I measured from this point diagonally across to this tip point, 7.5 centimeters, 2.96 inches. Blade length measured from this vertical line right here to the tip of the blade 8.1 centimeters, 3.2 inches. The blade thickness is just over 4 millimeters, 0.16 inches. The thickness of the edge behind the grind, well, where do you measure that? This is sort of a saber grind, and then that's got a really wide thickness behind the grind. It's not really an accurate measurement because that edge is designed more like a cross between a saber grind and a Scandi grind. It's kind of a weird edge right there. In any case, if you want to know how thick that is, that's 1.73 millimeters, 0.068 inches. So right where you see that grind line right there, the thickness of the steel where those two, where its partner on the other side meet up, that's how thick it is, 1.73 millimeters. Time for the handle. Handle thickness is 1.48 centimeters, which is 0.58 inches, so just over half of an inch thick. The handle length is 9.4 centimeters, which is 3.69 inches. The grip area, and I'm talking about behind this guard to the end of this little jimped area right here, 6.8 centimeters, 2.7 inches. But if you count this forward choil right here, then you've got 8.8 centimeters, which is 3.45 inches. And that allows somebody with a medium, large, and even an extra large, well, maybe not, depending on how large that extra large is. But somebody with a 10 size in European sizes or smaller is going to find a way to be comfortable with this knife. And you can be comfortable back here, put a little bit of a lanyard on it, and that pinky will have something to grab onto, or holding it this way. And I showed you the holds before. Yeah, it holds quite well. Total length is 17.5 centimeters, 6.9 inches. It weighs 156 grams, which is 5.5 ounces. Including the sheath, it is now 214 grams, 7.5 ounces. And it works quite well in the hand. It's easy to hold, easy to cut, and I did some cutting before. You can get behind that guard and get a good hold with those 3 fingers and your thumb up here, and you can either put your thumb on this area of jimping and get a decent hold for some reach, although it is a short knife, or you can reach up just a little bit, half on the end of the handle and half up on that jimping is all that's comfortable. Stretching out just isn't comfortable. Backward grips, reverse grips. The blade forward reverse grip is very comfortable. The blade backward is terrible. It just does not work. There's no way to get a good blade backward reverse grip. It just won't work. But the blade forward reverse grip can be quite comfortable and you can get it quite stable in the hand. And then you can do the other different versions of those grips. Put your index finger in front and your middle finger in that choil. And then you can do some of that delicate cutting of something softer, a pinch grip, what have you. You can do all those different kinds of things with it. What do I like on this knife? I really like that they added this forward choil. Without it, this thing would be much less useful than it is. I like the different kinds of grinds on here. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm using that word sarcastically. It's going to be a challenge to sharpen this knife without ruining this edge. So you're going to have to take off steel on the entire face of that grind, just like a Scandi. I'll show you a close-up of this zone right here. I'll show you a close-up of the different grinds up here. Very interesting kind of knife. This edge here is sort of like a very short saber grind, so it's much less steel that you take off, but you're going to take off steel on that entire face unless you want to change how it's sharpened. And if you change it and start to create a micro bevel on the end, it'll be good for 1, 2, maybe 3 sharpenings, and after that, you're going to have started to take it way down, and it's just going to get really fat and blunt and useless on you. So if you want to sharpen this knife, you really ought to keep the exact same grinds just the way they are. And that's not easily done for everybody, but it's not super hard to do either. If you use a whetstone, this face here, that's going to be easy to sharpen, but this one not so much because of that transition between these 2 sections. That's going to get tricky to do on a whetstone because you'd have to go right on the edge of the stone, and it's not going to be easily done. This edge here, you'll be able to sharpen that like nobody's business. Simple, easy, squeezy, no problem at all. So what do I like about this knife? I like that it's small. I like that it's not too heavy. I like that I can put it on my belt on a horizontal kind of ride. You could put it on the small of your back, wherever. And it, yes, is it tactical? Well, maybe in some scenarios, sure. But it's more of a sort of fantasy kind of tactical knife. Could it be a camp knife, a bushcrafting knife? Yes, you could use it for those things. It won't be the best at those things, of course, but it's okay. How comfortable is it in hand? Well, like the Big Brother, I found this section right here to be very uncomfortable on the D-165. On this one, it's a little bit better, but I would still take some sandpaper, and I feel like I want to round off some of these edges here just to make it a little bit softer. It's quite sharp right here, and it can get hot on the hands easily. Nothing major, just 5 minutes with some sandpaper to round some things off and make it a little more comfortable. So there you go. That's what I think of this knife. I kind of like it. I kind of am not sure about it. I think it's genuine D2. It's a big, thick beast of a knife. It is a good conversation starter. It's going to get your friends talking. I like this better than the large version, the full-size version. So if you want something like this, I would suggest that you get the D-170 instead of the D-165. You'll save some money, and you'll still get the same kind of conversation piece with your friends that you would have with the larger one. So there you go. I like this for a certain crowd. Some of you guys just won't like it at all, and some of you guys might be interested. If you want to buy this, please consider using the links in the description below so that I get a little bit of credit for it. Thanks so much for watching my video. Thanks for liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. And please do share and comment. Those things really do mean an awful lot to me. And hitting that like button helps as well. Thanks for watching. Remember, always cut towards your chum, not your bloomin' thumb.